Tonight, the mortgage mess. It's getting worse. The foreclosure rate hits an all-time high, and more homeowners are behind on their payments than any time in the last 20 years. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, is there a link between vaccines and autism? For the first time, the government is ordering a vaccine injury fund to compensate a child who came down with autism-like symptoms. Massacre in a seminary. A gunman opens fire inside a school for rabbinical students in Jerusalem. And a deep, dark mystery. What's killing the bats of the Northeast?
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It's one of the worst things that can happen to a family, but it's happening to more and more in this country. They're losing their homes to foreclosure. The mortgage industry reported today that the foreclosure rate in the final quarter of 2007 hit an all-time high. And the government says that for the first time ever, lenders own a greater percentage of the average home than the homeowner does. Anthony Mason now on the American dream that's slipping away.
From the Bronx to Boston to St. Paul, foreclosures are spreading like cancer. In Minnesota, legislators aren't waiting for outside help. They've introduced legislation to require lenders to defer foreclosures on subprime loans for a year.
We have real families that are being devastated by the foreclosure crisis.
Across the country, the delinquency rate for all mortgages, those are payments more than a month past due, has soared to nearly 6%, the worst since 1985. For subprime loans, the delinquency rate is a staggering 20%, a record. And with house prices falling, by one estimate, nearly 9 million homeowners, that's 10% of all homes, will have no equity in their houses or owe more than they're worth by the end of this month. Even Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke admitted this week
more can and should be done.
But the Bush administration has no plans to do more.
We do not believe that the American taxpayer should be bailing out lenders or borrowers, but what we do believe is that we can help try to bring them together.
And I do think the White House is inviting a longer and deeper recession.
Congressman Barney Frank, head of the Financial Services Committee, says you can't worry about rescuing some borrowers who made bad decisions.
If you insist on not doing anything at all to help them, they're not the only ones who will suffer. The whole economy will.
Frank will introduce legislation next week to help lenders who agree to reduce the principal on delinquent loans for borrowers who could then afford to pay. Analysts say whatever action the government takes needs to be clear and quick.
Especially because any complicated criteria we tried to apply, household by household, would be much more time-consuming and cumbersome than we really can afford right now, given the pace of rising foreclosures.
The White House has helped launch the Hope Now Alliance, which claims to have helped 1 million troubled borrowers, but it hasn't been enough, and the foreclosure rate is expected to keep rising the rest of this year, Katie.
And Anthony, let's talk about the other distressing report out today that for the first time since World War II, the average American family has more debt than equity in their homes.
Yeah, that's a pretty staggering number. Well, first of all, it was all those borrowers who bought in the past few years with no money down. But also remember, during the housing boom, a lot of people used the equity in their home as a bank to borrow against. Well, now that house values are coming down, people are realizing they have a lot less equity in their homes.
It's a real mess. Anthony Mason, Anthony, thank you. On the CBS News Money Watch, the price of oil, and you guessed it, another all-time high. It traded just shy of $106 a barrel today before closing at $105.47. It's not demand driving the price up, but investors pouring money into oil as a hedge against inflation. In fact, in the United States, demand for gasoline has been falling in recent weeks and supplies rising, but the price is still going up. Turning to health news now, and a very controversial question that's been debated for some time now. Is there a link between childhood vaccines and autism? For the first time, federal officials conceded that vaccines contributed to autism-like symptoms in one child. The case involved a 9-year-old girl whose family filed a legal claim against the government, and some believe that what happened to her could have major implications for other families. Cheryl Atkinson has been investigating. Here's her report.
Today, the polling spoke out for the first time in a case being watched by thousands of families with autistic children.
My daughter, who had been completely normal until getting 9 vaccines in one day, was suddenly no longer there.
Hannah Poling appeared to be like many children. At 19 months, her pediatrician noted she was alert and active and spoke well. At that same visit, she got 5 shots, 9 doses of vaccines, and almost immediately developed fever, seizures, and severe health problems. 8 years later, the government has quietly conceded that vaccines aggravated a rare cell disorder nobody knew Hannah had, resulting in her brain damage. Congressman Dave Weldon is also a doctor. He's long pushed the government to aggressively work to develop ways to screen for children who might be the most susceptible to ill effects from vaccines.
The government has been telling the public for over a decade that there's absolutely no reason to be concerned about any link.
I wouldn't recommend they say something like that in light of the polling case and the admission on the part of the government.
But today, a top U.S. health official defended the view of most of the government's scientific experts.
This is a complete mischaracterization of the findings of a very simple situation of one child with an unusual disorder, and it would be completely wrong to say that this has bearing to the vast majority of children with autism.
The polling case is the first of its kind to become public, but our investigation uncovered at least 9 other cases as far back as 1990, where records show the court ordered the government to compensate families whose children developed autism or autistic-like symptoms, toddlers who had been called very smart and impressed doctors with their intelligence and curiosity until their vaccinations.
Children much like Hannah Poling. What's still being debated, Katie, is whether her case is an exception or a precedent.
Cheryl Atkinson in Washington. Thanks, Cheryl. Here tonight to help put this case into context, our medical correspondent, Dr. John LaPook. And John, despite what Julie Gerberding said of the CDC, I can imagine some parents watching this are thinking, should I or shouldn't I vaccinate my child?
Katie, I totally get it. This is a totally charged issue. But remember, aside from clean water, nothing has saved more lives than vaccines. People forget how devastating these illnesses were. Measles alone, before the vaccination came along, it caused about 5,000 cases of brain infection every year. So the CDC, other organizations, expert panels have said, we've done lots of evidence, we've done lots of studies, and based on current evidence, there's no suggestion that vaccines cause autism. And right now, they're sticking to that.
What about spacing them out at least? I think this little girl got 5 in one day.
Right. You should talk to your doctor about that. I spoke to the CDC today. They said, you know what? We're constantly monitoring the situation. If things change, then we will make new recommendations. For now, they're standing pat.
All right, Dr. John LaPook. John, as always, thank you so much. Overseas tonight, a deadly attack inside a Jewish seminary in Jerusalem. President Bush condemned it. A gunman from Arab East Jerusalem opened fire in the school library, killing 8 people. 9 others were wounded, 3 of them seriously. More now from Mark Phillips.
It was the worst attack in Israel in 2 years, and it wasn't random. It struck at the heart of Israel's hardline religious West Bank settlers movement. According to Jerusalem police, a gunman entered the library of a rabbinical college where students, most of them of high school age, were gathered and opened fire. The death toll climbed throughout the evening and could still rise. The gunman was shot and killed as well. The attack brought immediate celebration in Gaza, where more than 100 people were killed by Israeli action against Hamas militants over the past week. But the first claim of responsibility came via the TV station run by the Hezbollah movement in Lebanon. It said the attack was carried out in the name of one of its leaders killed last month. After years of relative calm, the fear now is that Israel and militant Palestinian groups are locked in another cycle of violence. The rage in Gaza over the recent Israeli attacks has intensified. The Hamas rocket fire into Israel that the Israelis have been trying to suppress has continued with increasing accuracy. And the threat tonight was of retaliation.
We will be taking steps in the coming days to make sure that our people are safer.
Another casualty in this attack may be the already shaky peace process. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
Meanwhile, a reminder today that Baghdad is still a very dangerous place. At least 53 people were killed and more than 120 wounded when 2 bombs went off within minutes of each other in a shopping area crowded with street vendors. The neighborhood is middle class, predominantly Shiite, and many of the victims were teenagers. Here in New York, the hunt is on for the person who set off a small bomb in Times Square early this morning. The explosion broke windows at a military recruiting station, but no one was hurt. Jeff Glore is in Times Square. And Jeff, I understand the police and FBI are poring over surveillance tapes as we speak.
They are, Katie. This is one of the most photographed intersections in the world. And tonight, one of those cameras is giving police a key piece of evidence.
Surveillance video shows a bicyclist approach the famous Times Square military recruiting station. Soon after, the explosion.
It was very loud. It shook the hotel, and I was on the 24th floor.
It went off at 3:40 a.m., shattering glass and charring the door. No one was hurt, but officers quickly cordoned off the scene. Police say the explosive material was inside an ammunition box, the kind found at military supply stores. Mike White is the former commanding officer of the NYPD's bomb squad.
It's one of the most simplistic, basic style devices. It's a light the fuse and run away, or light the fuse and throw style device.
This recruiting center first opened in 1946 and remains one of the busiest locations in the country.
The fact that this appears deliberately directed at the recruiting station insults every one of our brave men and women in uniform.
Now, investigators are trying to figure out if there's a link to two previous attacks, both in New York City, in 2005 at the British consulate, the second at the Mexican consulate in 2007.
And tonight, CBS News has learned that several members of Congress have received pictures of the recruiting center that was bombed. They are investigating. Katie?
Jeff Glor. Jeff, thanks so much. There is much more CBS News ahead. Up next, deja vu all over again. They voted once in Michigan and Florida, and now some want to redo those primaries. This year's presidential campaign is setting financial records. Barack Obama today reported raising a record $55 million last month. Hillary Clinton took in $35 million, and she raised $4 million online just since Tuesday when she won 3 out of 4 primaries. Meanwhile, Nancy Cordes reports there was more talk today about primary do-overs in Florida and Michigan.
This cardboard cutout is the closest Senator Obama came to campaigning in Florida. Why stump in a state that doesn't count? But suddenly, not counting isn't sitting so well with the Sunshine State.
Some party boss in Washington decided that they were not going to have the people's voice be heard. Are you kidding me?
Last year, the Democratic National Committee stripped Florida and Michigan of their delegates as punishment for pushing up the dates of their primaries. Back then, no one expected the race would be so close. Now, the nation's 4th and 8th largest states are fighting furiously for a say in the outcome.
The reality is, going forward, there is no way the Democrats can win the White House without Michigan and Florida, so it has to be resolved.
But how? An after-hours strategy session on Capitol Hill didn't produce a solution. Pleading for a pardon from the DNC didn't work either.
The chairman of the party, Howard Dean, says, nope, not going to bend the rules for you. The only option you have is to redo the entire process.
But that would mean ignoring the 2.3 million votes that have already been cast.
People are angry and they don't want to go and re-vote. They waited online, they took time off from work, they went to vote, and they cast their ballots. We voted.
The price tag is a problem too. A full-fledged primary could cost as much as $15 million in Florida, a little less in Michigan. A scaled-back or firehouse primary with fewer precincts would cut the cost in half, but it would also draw fewer voters. Michigan's considering a caucus, which could be easier to organize on short notice. But Florida Democrats, still stinging from the 2000 debacle, are adamant. It's a primary or nothing.
The only thing left to do is to redo the election, a full-blown election, and have the Democratic National Committee pay for the redo.
But the DNC isn't opening its wallet, and neither so far have the states. Everyone wants a way out of this mess, Katie, but nobody wants to be stuck with the tab.
All right. This is often the case, right, in life. Nancy
Exactly.
Cordes. Nancy, thank you. When we come back, the closest of close calls and the alarm system that prevented a mid-air disaster. Federal regulators said today they will fine Southwest Airlines more than $10 million for failing to inspect its older planes for cracks in their fuselages. The agency says the airline operated nearly 60,000 flights using 46 planes that had not been inspected. Southwest insists it complied with regulators' requests and will contest any fine. Now, white-knuckle flyers will not like this story. There was a close call involving 2 passenger jets in the sky over Pennsylvania on Tuesday morning. The FAA is pointing the finger at a rookie air traffic controller. But as Kelly Wallace reports, this is not an isolated incident.
A Delta MD-80 was en route to New York from Cincinnati with 57 people on board when southeast of Pittsburgh, an air traffic control trainee directed a U.S. Airways Express plane with 70 people on board to turn south, putting the 2 planes on a crash course. A cockpit collision alert like this one went off in both planes, signaling the Delta pilot to nosedive and the other pilot to climb. Before that evasive action, the planes were separated by just 400 feet vertically, 3 miles horizontally. FAA standards say planes must be at least 1,000 feet and 5 miles apart. Melissa Ott is an air traffic controller and the union representative at the center where the incident occurred in Oberlin, Ohio. She watched a radar recording of this near miss 3 times.
In my 17 years, I have never seen anything this close.
The controller who made the mistake was a trainee, working with 2 senior controllers at the time. The FAA blames the incident on operator error and says it ended with the aircraft taking appropriate action.
As you have an increase in the volume of air traffic in the nation's airspace, these kinds of events are going up.
This latest close call comes in the midst of a bitter labor dispute between controllers and the FAA over staffing and pay. And the fear is that at some point this battle may affect safety in the skies. Kelly Wallace, CBS News, New York.
Meanwhile, at the White House today, President Bush honored the last surviving American soldier from World War I. Frank Buckles is 107. When he was 16, he lied about his age to get into the Army and served in Europe. Later, as a civilian steamship worker, he spent 3 years in a Japanese prison camp during World War II. Buckles was also honored at the Pentagon, where his portrait will be displayed. Coming up next, a dark mystery in the caves of New York. What's killing all the bats? Finally tonight, going to bat for bats. From Count Dracula to Bruce Wayne, these exotic creatures have haunted our imagination. But these days, biologists are haunted by a mystery. Bats are dying, and they're trying to find out why. Here's Daniel Seberg.
This is what healthy bats look like when waking from hibernation. Small clusters emerging from months of slumber.
It's to make sure we don't carry contaminants from site to site. Here.
But when we went with biologist Al Hicks to an abandoned underground mine near Kingston, New York, it looked like a bat morgue, with many of the fragile mammals already dead or dying in our hands.
This is the biggest threat to the bats that I've ever seen, and no question about it.
Normally, these small brown bats should respond to our lights and noise, but their bodies are so weak, they're too lethargic to move. Their fat stores have been mysteriously depleted.
If what we see here continues to play out through the winter, we'll lose most of them.
One of the most startling things that biologists are finding isn't just the condition of the bats in the cave, but it's when they wake up and in a desperate bid for food, fly out into the dead of winter.
They're basically starving to death. They can either die hanging up in the mines, or they can come out here and hope that they'll find insects flying around over the snowbanks.
But why is this happening? There are 3 main theories, but no conclusive answer. Some researchers believe it's because of a fungus Hicks discovered growing on their noses and wings. He calls it white nose syndrome.
Their bodies are wasted.
Wildlife pathologist Ward Stone has another idea. He believes the bats are the canary in a climate change coal mine.
These bats are warning us that there are some big changes, ecological changes taking place that are impacting on them.
Stone says warmer weather means bats enter hibernation much later in the winter, long after their food supply of insects is gone. So they enter the caves with little body fat stored up. But Texas bat conservationist Merlin Tuttle dismisses both those theories. He suspects airborne toxins from pesticides, maybe even from spraying for the West Nile virus. And when bats decline, he says we all lose.
We need bats, like them or not. Bats are primary predators of vast numbers of insects that fly at night, and without them, whole ecosystems could be jeopardized.
Whatever the cause, the problem has exploded. From just 4 New York caves last year to caves and mines in 3 different Northeast states. This year's spring awakening for bats looks very dark indeed. Daniel Seberg, CBS News, Kingston, New York.
Now, bats are not the only species mysteriously dying. Tomorrow, the vanishing bees, trying to understand why more than a third of them have disappeared and what it may mean. And that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.